Greetings, brothers and sisters. Probably a shorter video today. I just released a Journey series video last night, and it's a longer one. And I'm doing all this outdoor work, and it's going great. Feels good to be outside and getting sun or whatever it is. But I want to do a little intro here because my wife and I started watching the HBO TV show Perry Mason. And like everything else on HBO, it's a good quality show in terms of how it's made, production values, script, acting, all these things. It's a well-made show. One of my viewers actually suggested it, but I was already had bookmarked it. My wife and I had some association with the original show, right? Which I'll talk about in a bit. What I want to talk about is them pushing diversity on us, woke diversity on us. It invades every part of every TV show, forced, unnatural, woke diversity, right? And as a young person, I love diversity. And, I still do in this way. I like the different aspects of, the multicultural world. I've traveled quite a bit. But even as a young person, I've talked about this before. I watched all these shows, African American shows, right? Sanford and Son, like one of my favorite shows when I was a kid. What's Happening, right? These shows. I watched the movie Shaft. I watched a lot of, kung fu movies, Asian kung fu movies. And I've always had a fascination with the Native American culture. Like I've definitely had some sort of past life. And I used to root for the Indians in the cowboy and Indian movies. Watched a lot of these types of, there was a small amount of Native American shows and movies which I watched. White Shadow was a great show. I grew up. It was basketball, but it was also a well-made show, right? Like these things. So I've always liked diversity. And I like things that are just different, right? Something that's new, like something that hasn't happened before. Teams that haven't won the Super Bowl, things like that. Something interesting, right? And then also, like when you look at news media people, and I'll show you a little, more of that. Got this thing with Jen Psaki. They all have the same accent, right? The news accent. I don't know what it is, Midwestern or whatever. But America has like a variety of accents. So all these various Southern accents, and then New York and Boston and Chicago accents. These heavy accents, right? And you never see any news people with these accents, even though they come from those places. It'd be great to see that, right? Like have some, like they all just talk the same. Have something that's a little bit different. And, in that, like I make fun of mock Fetterman, but I kind of like that he wears shorts to the Senate. I like irreverence. I don't hold these places in high esteem. The Senate, the news media, like all these suit and ties, and are useless to me. Like I'll never wear a tie again in my life. Like like I mean, I don't believe in it. Right? It's just some weird, dandy. What was I call it? A chap, right? Some fancy, whatever. So this comes from the elitist or these aristocracy. So like Fetterman being the way he is, even having a breakdown, depression, like that's interesting. Like I might make fun of everything, but some things I enjoy to see. I'm glad to see it. That's what I liked about Trump. He was irreverent, right? Tweeting in the middle of the night. He didn't act presidential because it's all a joke, and they're all like these social constructs, and I don't like them, and I like to see them come down, right? In terms of diversity, I knew different types of people throughout my life, right? I started waiting tables in my 20s, and I moved to Atlanta, and I ended up working with, openly gay men, right? First time I met gay people that weren't, like that I knew that were gay, that talked about being gay, right? And, there was all this stigma that you had growing up about gay people, and you've said the F slur to your friends or whatever was a negative, whatever it was. But I worked with them, and I was like, they're just like everybody else. Like some of them I like, some of them I didn't like. It's just like anything else, right? Like I don't judge people on their demographics. Like I don't, I really don't get along with very many people, but it isn't because of their demographic, whatever it is, their age, their sex, their sexual orientation, their race, their all these things. It's just a matter of if you have to work with people, you have to have relationships with them. It's their personality. Like it always comes down to people's personalities, and it's their belief system's part of it. Like I'd have trouble talking to a sheeple. Like I don't have anything to talk about with people. But in terms of like dealing with people and working with them, and it matters whether you've had some past life with them or whatever. On a soul level, like their soul energy and who they are as an essence, the energy they exude, is everything I talk about here. That's the most important thing to me. In terms of viewers, I think most of my viewers are people that aren't, that are feel different anywhere they are. Like, it's people who are resonating on a different spiritual level, right? People have, maybe they didn't connect with people in their families and the people around them. And I mean, that's, like typical of, I think, almost everybody, but specifically spiritual people who, grow up in an environment where everyone else is like on a different level than them and their souls are seeking something more, right? And so, that's what I attune to. That's what's important to me. People who resonate like on the same vibratory level and consciousness level that I do. And, there's people, your soul is from different parts of the universe. So it doesn't matter what demographic or, what your makeup is. The boxes you would check when they're asking you about your background and what you are or whatever it is. And so for me, it's about that. Like I can get along with, in a work situation, a school situation, any kind of, situation, people who are reasonable, and are just trying to be successful and not cause problems. I mean, there are lots of people who just want to make life miserable for other people. I mean, it's just, I would say it's a higher percentage than people realize. A lot of people out there that just inside they want to see other people suffer, they suck, and they feel bad about themselves, right? And that's, it's what you are inside. Like, that's easy to get along with or whatever it is. My brother once said, I was in my 20s, he was like, there's two kinds of people. There's people like, when they walk up to you, you're like, oh yeah, hey, you're pretty happy. And then there's people you're like, oh my God, that guy, right? Like, it's really three, because the majority of people, you just don't register, one way or another. You don't care. You're neutral feeling about it. So in that, I, was watching this show, Perry Mason, and I do not have any issues with lesbian people. Like in terms of, I had lesbian bosses when I, had my first job at, at a treatment center. They were great bosses. We got along fine, very respectful. One was the head of there's a supervisor, and one was the director of the cottage or whatever it was. And before that, I worked, I was working at a restaurant in Northampton, Massachusetts, and where Smith College is. In Smith College, there's, a lot of lesbians that go there. And one of the fellows, one of my other servers that worked there was a lesbian, and we worked together, great. Like we had a good relationship. We were good, conversations and stuff and whatever, right? So I don't, I just don't care about stuff like that. And I don't mind seeing it in a TV show or movie if it makes sense, right? Like if it's part of the storyline, right? Like I don't, if it's there's a demographic that is in a TV show or movie that makes sense that it's in there, like it's part of the script, part of the whole storyline. It's part of the character development, and it's natural. Like it just flows with the story. Like you come up with a story, and it's just part of the story. But we see more and more that they put all this stuff in there, and it's woke, and it's wrong, and it's, there's a lot of feminist stuff. Like in the Perry Mason stuff, it's loaded with feminism. How you can see the men back in the 20s, it's about men in the 20s, who men are treating women in a way, and women know better, and they're just, they have to suffer the men there. And that wasn't part of the show. Like, so my wife and I both had watched Perry Mason to some extent. And for me, I worked third shift security guard. I was playing basketball and I twisted my ankle. I rolled my ankle. And I messed up a ligament. I was in a cast for 6 weeks. And so I ended up working third shift security because that's all I could do. And the whole thing about it was they wanted you to stay awake. And in various places, they had me go to different places. I'm just like a security guard, right? Wearing a uniform. And, very little training. And I could watch TV. And the TV that was on at 4 in the morning, and, it was not cable. It was like these tiny little TVs that were in, the security office. Some of the places had them. And one particular where I worked the most. And the channels would go off the air, the local channels. This is in Florida, right? And the one channel that was on had like old TV shows, The Rifleman, like these shows, and Perry Mason. And I wouldn't have chosen to watch Perry Mason otherwise. And Perry Mason was this guy, Raymond Burr, who later played Ironside. He was lawyers in both of these shows. Raymond Burr was like some Shakespearean actor with powerful voice, like a James Earl Jones type of a person, right? Like, he has a person who do voiceovers things. And he got so fat, like they had to stick him in a wheelchair for the Ironside show. It was basically a remake of Perry Mason, which was, one of the first, if not the first, courtroom dramas. And some of the shows were in black and white, right? And it must have lasted seasons, and I watched, a bunch of them. And, it was all right. Like, I'm trying to stay awake or whatever in the middle of the night. And in the show, there's a character named Della Street, who's Perry Mason's very efficient, get it done secretary, right? Very organized. And, and now in my existence, like I need that, right? Like I'm a disorganized person who has no clerical skills. I didn't know it back then. I'm just working third shift security guard. And back when I used drugs and drank, like whatever it is, right? I was, you know, um, like not a focused person. But somebody like Della Street, my wife does a lot of those things. She's very, efficient and organized, which I appreciate, right? But Della Street was a very prim and proper lady, just dressed up, refined, all these things. And they made her a lesbian in the HBO show. Feminist, she complains about, the treatment of women, and like she has a totally different character than the character. Like they've taken the character another direction. And her being a lesbian is not really a part of the narrative. Like it's barely there. At least, we're five episodes into it. And her lover is a younger woman who has got about a minute and a half of time in like 5 hours of the show, right? Like it's not a factor. It's just they want to put this storyline in there. They're not focusing on it, right? They just have it there as a way to, change it. And it's just, it's hard to watch because it's not naturally. They've taken an existing character and they're remaking something. They're taking a show that existed in the past, right? Like, a TV show that had character definition, and they're saying, all right, let's make Della Street a lesbian. Why? Well, there's none in there. Like, so we have to have somebody, right? We have to have this storyline like somewhere in here. So let's do that. And it's just contrived and whatever. Why? Like, why force this on people? They don't want it. Like, the majority of people don't want it. And if it was, again, part of the, original storyline, but they're, the preaching, the other piece is the feminist preaching of how bad men suck. Like, you see it with, like, Della Street is the efficient one, and there's another lawyer there before, like the whole, spoiler alert, there's John Lithgow plays the original lawyer, and then, Della Street will eventually, work with Perry Mason as a private investigator in the beginning, whatever. They have this storyline that happens. But she's the efficient one. And there's a woman who's a preacher, and she's, being held down by the men who run the whatever religious faction. And there's just all this stuff, right? How men are oppressing women and how bad men suck. And, it's just a constant, like, we get it, right? We get your point of view. Like, this is just the beginning of the Me Too thing. And they just want to say, that men suck, mostly white men, because there's men being, racially prejudiced and things like this, and mistreating black people, just abusing their power. And it's a constant thing that we see, right? A constant, like, and taking something that was, had its own universe, the Perry Mason universe, and warping it to include wokeness in a way that it doesn't flow with the story. And if you can, if it's natural and, it's something that's there, then fine. Like, I don't mind seeing that. Like, I can handle other people's beliefs. Let's just stop forcing it on everybody. It's just, it's tedious. And you see it in almost everything that's being made now. I've talked about this before. But anyways, let's get into the other stuff here. Just want to add one more thing about this. So the fact that his name is Mason, right? Perry Mason. And they call him Mason. The new show, they're calling him Mason all the time. An interesting choice of, a name here because of Freemasonic, all of it, which we talk about here quite a bit. But them referring to him as Mason, any character named Mason, first name Mason, certainly last name Mason, and hearing it over and over again. When someone's referring to him as Mason, that he, represents the Freemasons, right? Like, this is, you can say every line in the show that the word Mason is used has a double meaning. I just want to add that because it's, kind of important. But anyways, let's get into the other stuff here. Okay, so one of my viewers sent me this little segment of this interview Nate Burleson did with the former President Barack Obama.
And she had mentioned that for about 10 years of the marriage, she really didn't like you.
Oh, man.
So asking...
So this, remember, Michelle Obama came out and said that she hated Barack. She, hated him for 10 years. She would just look at him and, like, I hate you kind of thing, right? That's how it came across. Which happens in life where you are with somebody and you really dislike them. Which is a very telling thing, though, so it either says a lot about her or a lot about him. And, I don't have the negative feelings that most of you guys have towards Barack Obama. They're all, maybe for me it was like he can't be mocked as easy because he's not like senile like Jojo Magoo, and he's good at his role. He was good at his role as president. I'm not saying he was a good president. He was good at being a politician, which isn't a plus, but he was a competent politician. Most of them aren't competent. Most of the politicians, and I just don't care about the whole thing that most of you guys care about these. Any Democratic person, most of you guys are going to hate anyway. So that's just how it is. But the relationship with Michelle is weird, right? Her being very masculine and all those things. And her coming out saying this amongst other things, because she seemed to, undermine him a lot. Like, whatever public appearance, didn't like him, she said. And, it was like this sort of, nut crushing, And so let's get into it here.
For a friend, how do you get back in good graces? Again, for a friend. You got a pen so I can take some notes?
Let me just say this.
How do you get back into good graces? Well, if he cheated on her or whatever, what's going on there, right? If he did something, that's one thing. But if she's just hating him just because she hates him, right? But this is the funny part here.
It sure helps to be out of the White House. And to
Wait, this happened when you were in the White House? Like when you were president, she hated you?
have a little more time with her.
Right.
You know what?
And that's that when someone hates you, that's always, what are you talking about?
Also helps, though, about children. And
Yeah.
I don't know about your spouse, Michelle, when our girls were growing up, that was priority number 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Of course.
Okay, so this is the part that, what are you talking about? When you have priorities, it's one. It would be one. Okay, children would be first, and then you'd have something else. They can't be your first four priorities. But that's not true. That's a complete lie. Because if your kids were your priority, her priority, you wouldn't be in politics. You wouldn't be a senator. You could be a local, it could be a state senator, right, or something like that. But you wouldn't be a senator. You wouldn't be in national politics, and you certainly wouldn't run for president. When the kids were young, their kids were young, and he was running for president. And she was behind him and backing that, and she liked it and all these things. And you wouldn't do that if your kids are the priority, because those kids' lives are never going to be the same. They're not going to have a natural life. Living in the spotlight, growing up in the spotlight, there's going to be people that just hate them. All the people on the Republican side are just going to hate them just because they're your kids. And, any kids growing up, you look at the Bush kids, you look at the Chelsea Clinton, like they're just, their lives are determined for them. They have to sacrifice their normal, natural lives as growing up as American kids and be in the spotlight. They have to be the son of or the daughter of, right? Oh, you're Barack Obama's kids, right? Like that's how you're going to live the rest of your life. If your kids are the priority, you don't do that, right? If you make your kids the priority, then don't be great, because if you're great, your kids are going to suffer. If you're great at something, if you're famous, if you're somebody in this world, your kids are always going to be, that's going to be a thing for them. Look at the children of, rich and famous people almost always have problems, drug addicts, whatever it is, right? Identity crises. And so for him to say that their kids were their priority, that is just a complete and, utter lie. I'm going to stop here because, CBS copyrights you and everything. It's just the lies and the weirdness of this guy, right? And his wife, and you don't need to say that she's a dude, right? Like, we know that's out there. I made a video about that. It's how my channel became popular. Like we all have our suspicion about Michelle. It's not important to blurt it out. So I've been covering Jen Psaki. Like I saw that she had a show and she sucked at it. So I watched a couple of videos. Now YouTube is constantly recommending her videos. And this one is a doozy. So here's Jen Psaki out on the streets. There she is walking.
Congressman, how are you? Good to see you. I'm going to give you a hug.
Welcome to
Thanks.
Bagel Pub.
They're at the Bagel Pub. Her and Representative Goldman.
Heart of Brooklyn.
They're in the heart of Brooklyn right there. This is where the magic happens at the Bagel Pub. Okay, make sure you get as much in here about the Bagel Pub. Get everything going here. This is an advertisement for them.
It smells really good in here.
It does.
Is this a place you come to frequently?
Smells like bagels. This is where he comes for bagels.
Yeah, our district office is up the block, so this is like our local bagel spot.
Well,
Is there local? They're there eating bagels.
should we get some bagels?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
What kind of bagels you gonna get?
Okay. Hi there.
Do you guys have any bagels?
All right,
How
what's
are
your
you?
typical order?
So if I'm really digging in, I will do a whole wheat everything.
If you're really digging in, you do a whole wheat bagel.
Well, I mean, wait until the rest of the
Okay,
order.
okay.
All right, so
Okay, then don't jump to any conclusions, Jen Psaki.
whole wheat everything, toasted, cream cheese, lox, and tomato, please.
Oh, that sounds pretty good.
You know, you got to go all out with a lot.
You got to go out. You got to live life on the edge.
Absolutely. I'll have what he's having. Two.
Boom, kaboom. Let's do it.
Two. Exactly.
And a coffee for me. You want a coffee?
I'll have a coffee as well. Thank you so much. I'll have a small.
Small, black.
Just black coffee? That's
Just
how you
black.
take it?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Kaboom. All right. This is really quality TV. This is quality content. This is, no wonder they're doing so well in the ratings.
You've been having these bagel coffees.
Let's get back. We don't see enough stuff on New York. New York isn't focused enough on. We don't have enough New York stuff, like how great New York is, that everybody's leaving and nobody wants to be there and people are pulling out of New York and California. We don't get enough content from New York, right?
Caucus meetings regularly, right?
Yeah, we started soon after I got into Congress, and it's been great.
What made you want to start them?
Well,
There's some McDonald's in there too. They go have some people. Go
one is district pride. New York City bagels are famous. It's also a cultural thing.
Let's stop there for a second. Where are the best bagels in your district? Do you have to pick a bagel stop?
Come on, I'm a politician now. I can't possibly say where the best bagels. But
I can hit all the bagel shops. I just can't get enough bagels in my life. They're just so good. The bagel hole. There's a hole in it, and there's bagel. You toast it. It's made. It's bread. And I can't tell you which the best one is because I'm a politician, and I got to count on all the bagel vote.
It's very interesting because people have very strong opinions.
Yes, I bet they do.
About which bagel shop has the best bagels.
I bet they do.
So let's just make this whole 6-minute thing about bagels. Let's put this bagel, some guy, some annoying New York politician, and let's walk the streets of New York talking about bagels. I bet we'll get views.
But bagels bring people together.
What I found going through the orientation process,
Dropping the water sign here.
getting down to Congress, is there's very little opportunity for people to socialize in a non-partisan way.
Yeah.
And so the bagels bring people together, and the idea was to create...
Are you seriously pushing this thing, right? Nothing better to have somebody, with some, some lox, which is, salmon. This piece of chunk of salmon in their teeth while you're talking to them and, in a bipartisan way in a bagel shop.
A more relaxed atmosphere where Democrats, Republicans can get together, can get to know each other, which doesn't really exist in Congress.
No, it doesn't. So when you had the meetings in D.C., were Democrats and Republicans,
Yep.
they all came to get
Yep.
some bagels and have a conversation?
Absolutely. The last time we had
They're breaking down the political walls one bagel at a time.
probably a dozen people split relatively evenly between Democrats and Republicans. What's funny is a Republican colleague from North Dakota, Kelly Armstrong, told me that there's a statewide flour mill in North Dakota that he understood to have supplied flour to some of New York City's bagel shops.
No way. No way. The connectivity here. It's fascinating.
So we are working on trying to identify which of those bagels are used with North Dakota flour.
Wow.
Whoa, this is groundbreaking. North Dakota flour being used in New York bagels. It's bringing everybody together.
We can have a truly bipartisan bagels.
That's
Oh, wow, that's so great.
what you would get there.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it just keeps on going on. You're there in the bagel shop.
By Republicans primarily on George Soros. And we had a field hearing here in Manhattan a couple weeks ago that Chairman Jim Jordan
Let's go back here.
week. That is a very one-sided draconian immigration bill. And it has no chance of becoming law.
You've been very outspoken about what we've seen as anti-Semitism, rhetoric, and a range of actions we've seen across the country. Do you think...
Exactly. So let's focus on bagels. Right?
enough has been done, and what would you like to see happen in order to address this?
No, I don't think enough has been done. We continue to see a rise of anti-Semitism. The most incidents are in New York. I have a very large Jewish population. I have received a lot of anti-Semitic attacks online. And one of the things that was very disheartening to me is this focus by Republicans primarily on George Soros. And we had a field hearing here in Manhattan.
Exactly. I mean, we got bagels. Let's just put our differences, different opinion about George Soros behind us with the bagel shop.
A couple weeks ago that Chairman Jim Jordan put on. And it was about Alvin Bragg and crime in this
The
city.
same day Kevin McCarthy, I think, spoke at the stock exchange,
That is
if I'm getting
correct.
this correctly. Okay.
That is correct. And there was a man outside holding a sign that had the name Soros, a Star of David, and money signs. And there was a Republican witness at that hearing who said that that is 100% anti-Semitic. So one of the things that we need to do to...
Wait a minute. There was no bagels? Why don't you go offer that guy a bagel? I mean, like, maybe you like come together over a bagel. Like, you know, he put down his sign, he's got to eat the bagel. Maybe he'll change his view on things.
to stop the rise in anti-Semitism and call out anti-Semitism where it exists and have everybody across the whole spectrum say that it is unacceptable.
Thank you, Congressman Goldman.
This is who we are. And so, that's the direction they took it. They decided to start with bagels and end with Soros and anti-Semitism. To go along with these lines, also recommended to me by YouTube, bicyclist brings white supremacist low with skilled heckling. Rachel Maddow.
They wore their little masks and they had their little shields and they held upside down American flags. This is once again the white supremacist glee club that calls itself Patriot Front. They marched this weekend in D.C. trying to intimidate people, chanting racist slogans. And it looked...
So the first thing is, why is this dude covering this, right? Why is MSNBC covering these white supremacists? Because, like I said, I've met people from pretty much every demographic, racially, whatever it is, right? All these demographics, all the woke demographics. I've met people like that. I went to two liberal schools, my third attempt at college, and then my master's degree in counseling. And, I've lived in these various areas, and I know people have, interactions with these various groups of people. I have never met a white supremacist in my life, at least as far as I know. I don't know anybody who's a white supremacist, right? Maybe some people who comment or whatever it is. I don't know one of them, right? So think about the small percentage of people that are, we think about belief systems and all the people you've met in your life. How many white supremacists? You know people who are prejudiced. Everyone is to some extent. Everyone has their different views. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who join in a group like this and, KKK or any of these groups. I lived in Idaho for a while and was up near Coeur d'Alene. And there was these groups out there, right? There was a group that was being sued out of existence. There was a story that happened where they had this compound and this mom and this son, like an older mom and her 20-year-old son, were driving by the compound, and they had a crappy car, like an S box, like a boop box car, like an old car, and it backfired right when it went by the compound, and the people in there, the supremacists, thought they were being fired upon. They were, whatever they were, survivalist guy, whatever, and they ran out and they ran the car down, and they pistol whipped the dude, right? And the mom and the son sued them, and they ended up owning the compound, right? They this piece of land, and they had a cop there, interviewed. I'm watching the local news, and he said, there's these groups out here, and they don't really get along with each other, because they're hateful people. And we always have to go and break up fights, and they're just whatever they are, right? It's a fringe population. But the left focuses on them like it's all white people, right? Like it's all white people. And like I said, I know lots of white people, and I haven't met one white supremacist. I haven't met anybody who belongs in this group, right? Who belongs to this demographic.
A D.C. man named Joe Flood heard that they were out there, heard that that was happening. When he heard that they were out there in his city, he hopped on a bike and he went to go try to find them on the National Mall. You can see Mr. Flood there on the right. He's got the...
There he is. Because, you know, there's all these cops here and these guys, small amount of people, right? And I'm in the editing process, and I want to point out here, doesn't Joe Flood sound like a fake name? Right? What's your name? Joe. What's your last name? Flood. You know, like he's looking at like the newsstand, and he sees a headline that says, there's been a flood, right? Like,
red bike standing near the group. Mr. Flood told us when he found them today, he felt suddenly that it was his duty to say something. So he did.
He went out to troll them. And look at this flag upside down, because I'm going to cover that as well in a moment here.
There is simply no time. There will be no memory of America to continue. Your mom hates you. No.
Your mom hates you. This is the worst. This is the worst heckling ever.
History to fight for. You were the losers of your high school class.
This is their heckling, right? You were the losers of your high school class.
Into this one American.
You're sloppy. Your bandanas are not properly put on and clean.
Adrift. You're not even matching.
You're not even mad.
You all got different types of pants on. The cities of town.
Cargo pants are out. He's just letting them have it.
Reclaim your virginity. Anarchist.
Mr. Flood told...
That's funny. You thought that was good heckling, Rachel? That was good heckle. That's how you heckle white supremacists, right? Like, you don't even have to heckle them. They're like white supremacists, right? Nobody's listening to them. They have, and it's because of stuff like this the movement would be growing. It's because you're pushing it. You're making things break down around racial lines. It's the TV shows that are demonizing white men, that would make this movement grow, right? That you're constantly talking about how all Trump supporters are white supremacists and things like that. That's what's going to make it worse. Like you're fanning the flames, bringing this guy out and saying like he heckled them.
This quote, this guy was giving the speech. He kept having to stop and pull it out of his pocket and then start reading it again. So every time he stopped, I would yell at him and say he was boring. And then I said, why can't you memorize your speech? Why can't you memorize your speech? And then I said, you look like General Custer's illegitimate son. The guy sighed.
Wait, you didn't, the guy sighed and looked at me. And I thought, I got you in the head.
And looked at me and I thought, I got you. I got in your head. Now get out of my town.
He destroyed him. That guy, Joe Flood, and his bike. He destroyed those white
supremacist group eventually left D.C. this weekend, but not before Joe Flood took up permanent residence in the heart of the city.
This is who we are. Like, this is their content, right? So here is the flag that was flown upside down, right? On Capitol Hill. There's a tweet about it. No one's covering it in the mainstream media. But somebody took this picture, and of course it could be doctored, but it's at half-mast, and it's upside down, which means we're in distress, right? Now, I don't like flags. I've talked about this. There's one good flag. I mean, some of them maybe, there might be other ones that I will look at and say, oh, that's a good one. State flags or whatever. I'm not, into flags. But there's the skull and crossbones, the Jolly Roger. The pirate flag is by far the best. And, even with that, and I make a lot of spelling errors. I'm dyslexic, and, I can do like work that's, not detailed oriented. But if I was going to raise a flag, and that was my job, I would never put it up upside down, right? And if this happened, and it looked like it did, at the Capitol, at the U.S. Senate, like the most, one of the most important flags in the country, and somebody did this, and, like, this is the kind of thing white supremacists do. Okay, so I just want to say one more thing about this. There is, this work towards dividing people, which is always a part of this system. There's divide and conquer. And they're pushing these divisions. And the way they push them is they find the most extreme people, the people who are going to upset the people on the other side. And they promote them. And that's what Fox News has been doing forever, finding fringe people and making it sound like that's all the liberals. That's all the people, all the Democrats, all people like the two fringe people being Marjorie Taylor Greene and AOC, right? And they're just there to fan the flames of division and divide people more and more. And the thing is, the system's going to break down no matter what. And you're either going to be able to get along with your neighbors when everything goes local again, or you're not, right? Like that's, there'll be peace within small fragments of communities where people can get along and work together. And where they can't, there'll be, gangland sort of bloodshed. People devolve into the worst sort of Cro-Magnon man type of behaviors. And they're pushing for that, right? They're not setting you up for success in terms of going into the apocalypse. They want you to be divided as their, system, as a system that they know they've created dependence on it. Everyone's 100% dependent on the system, implodes. And, it's just a real dick move on their part. But speaking of dick moves, right, so there are these, I got a thread of things from this person. I think it starts here. And the person, let's pull this up here. And so here's the first comment. And the person writes, "Gratefulness has one L. How can you repeatedly misspell such a word, even with auto-check and so on, bizarro, or else you're trolling everyone?" I'm not. I chose to spell it with two L's. Gratefulness. I like the two L's on the word, right? The word full. It could be great spacefulness, right? It's opposed to heartfulness, which they use one L, and I thought that was always a mistake. The word full being important in the context of the full word full. It's just made up. Like it's a name of something. I could differentiate it from whatever else is going on. And so I misspell a lot of things, but this was intentional. Not trolling. I wanted it to be that way. I wanted the two L's on full. That was the reasoning behind it. But then the person wrote earlier, "Gratefulness has one L. How can you misspell a word over and over again, even with auto-check, and so on? It's baffling." So they wrote the comment once, but they did again. It really bothers this person, right? And I banned them, at least I think I did. And then someone else wrote, it's like they have a second person or the same person under a different name. "Sorry, Paul, but Gratefulness only has one L. It's mind-boggling. How can you get it wrong so over and over again? LOL." It sounds like the same person. Can you stop commenting on that? I got your comment. I understand you're upset about the extra L, right? It's gratefulness. That's the way I, thought of it, right? I think I explained it in the beginning. I don't know. Maybe I didn't. But for whatever reason, they take one L out of it, and that to me isn't the same word. When they say heartfulness, which is a made-up thing as well. But gratefulness is, to focus on gratitude and to be full of gratitude. But anyways, only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing from the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.